CIA didn't discover the spiritual realm. They discovered something much worse. Now, this discovery is unlike anything we've ever covered on this channel. We have covered a former intelligence officer who blew the whistle about a possible alien cover-up just several months ago. But this isn't just an AWOL government official. This is an actual CIA report listing the steps on how you can enter the spiritual realm. They discovered this system called the gateway process while exploring ways to use mind control against foreign enemies. Now, what is the gateway process and how does this tie into something that's clear as day in scripture? This report is a training system designed to focus brainwave output to alter consciousness and ultimately escape the restrictions of time and space. Now, if that sounds like a mouthful, I'm going to unpack it and really try to simplify it for you guys in a minute. I heard about this CIA report from the What If Alt History channel. And based on what was discovered in this CIA report, he came to this conclusion.
The conclusion I'm surprised people haven't reached from this, which the ancients all believed, is that if consciousness creates reality, that means there must be a perceiver to the universe. What this has done is prove the existence of God. If someone has to perceive the universe even before life, that means God is perceiving it. And this is the argument the ancients used to justify the existence of God.
But this isn't all sunshine and rainbows. Matter of fact, by the end of this video, I will make an argument that the thing they think they discovered is not just the spiritual realm and proof for God. It's actually something much, much worse. But I'll do my best to summarize this as best as I can. More or less, Robert Monroe worked with the CIA on this gateway process. The idea behind the gateway process is that we have a left side of our brain and a right side of our brain. The left side of our brain deals with more analytical, linear, logical thought, and the right side of our brain deals with more emotional, creative, and concepts of beauty and truth. Okay. Now, what Robert Monroe's theory was that they discovered that potentially through psychedelics, you can suppress the left side of your brain and open you up more to the spiritual realm. But his proposition was that you didn't have to use psychedelics, that you could actually use different frequencies and vibrations and meditation techniques to suppress that left side of the brain so that you could open your right side of the brain to this spiritual realm. This technique was essentially used as a spy technique. This was used to get information from people that they wouldn't have physical access to. And that is why the CIA was interested in this intelligence. Now, ironically enough, they proved that the spiritual realm exists. Now, if the spiritual realm exists, like we explored at the beginning of this clip, that means that there would be a God that exists, that we are not just material beings. We're not just physical beings, as the secular humanists would have us believe, that there's a spirit and there is a physical body. And conversely, that would also mean that evil and Satan exist. Now, if you remember this whole mind control, open up your third eye, spirit realm, insight, different dimension is actually what's explored in the TV show Stranger Things. So Robert Monroe went on to write 3 different books about this entire exploration process. Recently, all this stuff was declassified, and it seems like there is a consensus that there is the spiritual realm. Now, the unfortunate part is in the presentation of this unclassified document, which we're going to be looking at in a moment, and with the conclusions of it, it kind of endorses this new age spirituality. You are one with the universe. One consciousness exists, and that consciousness is the universe, and you are therefore one with the universe. Therefore, you are God. And if you listen closely, this exact idea is explored in the video by the Y-Files. Check this out.
Like this. The top layer is our reality. Everything that we can see and touch. That lays on top of these other dimensions, whatever they are. And all those dimensions and everything lays on top of this thing McDonald calls the absolute. The absolute is everywhere, but we can't see it. But everything happens inside it. So the absolute created our world. But who created the absolute? Well, isn't it obvious? You did.
According to his theory, the absolute created our world. We collectively are the absolute. Therefore, we created our world. But wait, there's more.
The absolute is a conscious energy field at rest.
Real simple.
No, it really is as simple as that. The absolute is an energy field that sits there doing nothing. But layered on top of that energy field is the energy field that makes up our reality. And in between those, other dimensions. But the absolute is us. We are the ones who created it and everything else. Not one of us, all of us. We're born into this reality with our own individual consciousness. We live out our time here on Earth, and then our consciousness returns to the absolute, where it came from. according to the Gateway Report, we return to this collective consciousness, but we also retain our individual identity. So, immortality in a way. Colonel MacDonald sees the absolute as what many people might consider God.
The concept of visible reality, that is the created world, as being an emanation of an omnipotent and omniscient divinity who is completely unknowable in his primary state of being. The absolute at rest in infinity is a concept straight out of Hebrew mystical philosophy. Even the Christian concept of the Trinity shines through the description of the absolute as presented in this paper.
So it's important to note that oftentimes where there is a hint of truth, the enemy is always looking to pervert said hint of truth into something that is no longer true. So based on the CIA study, there seems to be another dimension. There seems to be a spiritual dimension. There seems to be something beyond just our physical material world into another world that we can theoretically access. But what are the consequences of potentially accessing this world? Well, check out what All His said in his video.
There are non-human species, which Monroe saw as aliens, but are basically angels or demons. They're often happy to talk to Monroe and his crew and explain how the spirit world worked. Monroe built friendships with many of these beings, seeing them dozens of times repeatedly. The spirit world is largely chaotic, like a jungle or our real world. It's not orderly or safe like we like to imagine, but a natural ecosystem in which creatures have their own motivations, goals, they eat each other, some are stronger than others, and more. It's not a place of peace and serenity. That being said, there are very clearly some stronger and better types of creatures than others. Some of these things were benevolent and helped Monroe, and others were monsters who attacked him. The main way the spirit world operates is that it exists in opposition to our world. Our world is hard, difficult, brutal, and very real and tangible. It's often too hard and too real as we struggle every day to make ends meet. The spirit world doesn't have time. It's infinitely large, and thought creates action. The second you think something, it comes into existence. The thing is that this is incredibly boring, and the spirits envy the toughness of our lives. We have reality, and thus have to test ourselves. Thus, the spirits are always struggling to have bodies to inhabit. Some try to demonically possess people, some act like parasites, and they're all happy to incarnate and enter human bodies.
So that right there was What If Alt-Hist's assessment of Robert Monroe's 3-book series on this topic. That he didn't just go into the spiritual realm and it was all pleasantries, that there's demons that would attack him, and that these spirit beings, sounds a lot like Michael Heiser's work about the Nephilim, the other worlds, the Elohims, and their desire to inhabit humans. Sounds a lot like demon possession. This is not stuff that anyone should be dabbling with. But what if I told you it still gets worse? Before we look at what the Bible has to say on this topic, let's go back to the Why Files channel and see their conclusions on what all of this means.
The Gateway Report describes hemisync as a lamp versus a laser. The natural state of the human mind is like a lamp that emits light, but it's chaotic and messy and uneven over a large area. Hemisync lets the mind operate like a laser, producing a focused stream of energy. According to Gateway, when the frequency and amplitude of the human brain are brought into sync, it's possible to accelerate and raise the vibrational levels of the mind. As the mind resonates higher and higher, it can synchronize with the more complex energy levels in the universe. At these levels, the mind is capable of processing information in the same way it processes the energy of our current reality. In other words, you can see and feel and understand these other states of reality as easily as you understand this one. But you can do more than understand reality. You can learn to change it, control it, and bend it to your will. Like Neo in The Matrix, or like God.
Sound familiar? You could change reality like God. Now, what was that initial lie told to Eve in the garden? The serpent told Eve, "You will certainly not die if you eat the forbidden fruit. For God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." It's kind of eerie that the exact same language is used here as was in that video. So I think this would lead some to believe, well, what's the worst thing that could happen? If a Christian wants to do this meditation process, wouldn't this kind of get them closer to God by tapping into the spiritual realm? Well, there's a passage in Isaiah that I think addresses this. Isaiah 8:19 says, "When someone tells you to consult mediums and spiritists who whisper and mutter, should not a people inquire of their God? Why consult the dead on behalf of the living? Consult God's instruction in the testimony of warning. If anyone does not speak according to this word, they have no light of dawn." And we see other warnings like this, all the way in Leviticus to Acts in the New Testament, discouraging Christians from engaging with spiritists and psychics and dabbling into this world that we've seen so many people dabble in. So before I show you guys one more passage that glues this entire video together on how even though this proves the spiritual world is real and it proves the existence of God, this is dangerous. dangerous, let's look at the actual report and their conclusions from all of this research. So this is the second page from the CIA document signed by Colonel McDonald himself, and look at what the sentence says. I felt that it was necessary, after having completed the analysis, to point out that the resulting conclusions do not do any violence to the fundamental mainstream of either Eastern or Western belief system. So the CIA went out of their way to say that this didn't contradict any belief system. And I'll be sure to pin the videos that I reacted to so you can go watch them for yourself, which they basically come to more of a Eastern Universalist, all roads lead to Rome type of spirituality regarding the results of this study. Now, juxtapose this with the story of the incarnation of Christ, found at the beginning of the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. When we scroll down to verse 14, we see that the Word, Jesus, became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory and the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. The simplest way I could put this to you is that while religion is doing its best to get closer to God, Christianity is actually coming down and God getting closer to man. That is the point of the incarnation story, that there is a God and a divinity that operates in the spirit world, and there is humans that are created and have souls. We are not God. We are not the creator. We are not one with the universe. We don't have one consciousness that we share with God. There's a clear distinction all throughout the scriptures between creator and creation. Not to mention how the words of Jesus are in stark contradiction with any concept of universalism. The idea that all roads lead to Rome, that all religion is touching different sides of an elephant while being blindfolded and trying to describe them. That's kind of the conclusion when you watch the full-length version of the videos I reacted to. In John 14:6, Jesus is very clear. I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you really know me, you will know my Father as well. From now on, you do know him and have seen him. So Jesus makes the point that he is the only way, that he is how you get to know the Father, not through meditation, not through having some out-of-body experience, not through tapping into your subconscious mind, not through DMT or any type of psychedelic drugs, that the way you get to the Father and the way you ultimately get to heaven is by having a relationship and an encounter with Jesus. But there was one point in the video that I found extremely helpful where What If Alt-Hist describes this point from Robert Monroe.
The second dream of the town on the verge of heaven is symbolic for the church in the mid-20th century. Most Christians weren't religious in the way they were before, and didn't really believe in God. Thus, the church became about itself, effectively turning into a social club and not really believing in God. The church had rejected the insanity of the God of the Bible, instead creating a tame white bread version.
The interesting point here is that this sort of mysticism and Eastern New Ageism has become more and more prevalent in America. Why? Because the church didn't really take the Bible seriously. It didn't really take the God of the Bible seriously. And so the church just kind of became an institution. We would describe this today as moralistic, therapeutic deism. That God doesn't really care about how you live. God doesn't really want to engage with you relationally, and that he's more like a cosmic therapist that's very, very, very far away and you call on to when you may need a couple wishes from a genie. So to summarize, the CIA didn't discover universalism, Eckhart Tolle, we are one with the universe is God, therefore we're God. They discovered the oldest lie that Satan has ever told. They discovered the lie that you can be like God. And in turn, what they really discovered is Satan. And Satan is about lying, killing, stealing, and destroying, which is in opposition to what Jesus is about. That because of his death, we are now brought to life with Christ. And that's exactly the theme of our newest collection, the Death to Life collection, which will only be available for 7 days.